Watching Four Corners on the ABC is rarely less than instructive, and that was certainly the case with this week's program on the recent leadership crisis at the ABC. Instructive it was in a number of ways. First, it is a reminder that no other major media organisation in the country would have the courage to take a look at itself in such depth without fear or favour. Second, that as the people appointed to run the national broadcaster and chair its board were engaging in a battle for personal survival, the staff of the ABC were getting on with the job. Third, that neither the sacked managing director nor the former chair was suitable to lead and care for our most important cultural institution, as it was put in The Guardian by Margaret Simons, a distinguished journalist and academic who has reported authoritatively on the ABC for many years. Fourth, that Parliament must now take steps to try to ensure that this never happens again, that there be more independence, integrity, transparency in the process for appointing board directors. That is the point of the legislation I have introduced, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation Amendment Appointment of Directors Bill 2018 that we are debating today. I do not intend to bring this to a vote today, but I do hope the provisions of this bill may be incorporated in amended terms of reference for the current Senate inquiry into allegations of political interference, the ABC. On the other hand, I believe it would be useful for the committee to use the process I am proposing as guidelines in coming to a set of recommendations to try to ensure that what we have seen in recent weeks cannot happen again. As the terms of reference of that inquiry indicate, it must examine why it was that the board decided to terminate the contract of Ms Guthrie less than halfway into her contract. Public knowledge of what happened remains imperfect, despite the best efforts of journalists, up to and including those working for Four Corners. It is also the case that there is more to learn about the efforts of the government to influence the ABC. We do now know that Mr Milne did not want the ABC's chief economics correspondent sacked, did want the ABC's chief economics correspondent sacked to explore external development opportunities, as he put it to Ms Guthrie. And what did that phrase mean? Sarah Ferguson asked Mr Milne on Four Corners. Mr Milne replied that it was a silly corporate euphemism for firing her, quote unquote. Mr Milne denied that the government had ever placed political pressure on him either to sack ABC journalists or to influence the way the broadcaster reported events. However, he did acknowledge that the Communications Minister, Senator Fifield, called him frequently to discuss issues, as he told Four Corners. This does leave questions for the Senate inquiry to ask, but it would be a failure if the committee simply delves into the past rather than looking to solutions for the future. The ABC is the most trusted media and cultural organisation in the country. That was the finding of the Roy Morgan Research Organisation, which reported in May that just 9% of those surveyed distrusted the ABC, well ahead of commercial media. According to Morgan, the ABC is by far the nation's most trusted media organisation. This is backed up by the ABC's own research, which has found that fully 82% of people trust the information provided by the national broadcaster, again, well ahead of its commercial counterparts. Nothing could be more telling in this regard than another recent episode, again with Four Corners at its centre. The mere prospect of a Four Corners program on an aged care led the government to announce a Royal Commission. If the ABC in general and Four Corners specifically did not have a well-earned reputation within the community for accuracy and impartiality, the government would not have acted with such haste. They knew it would be better to get in first with a Royal Commission, that what was coming would make a compelling case for action, as other Four Corners programs have done in the past. They knew it would be better to move with speed rather than having to face the music before taking action. I commend the government for its good sense in this regard. The ABC has been the prism through which Australians have been able to inform and add to their knowledge about themselves and the world for close to a century. It also provides entertainment as well as services for children and the bush that no other organisation has been prepared or capable to do. It is well worth the public money invested in it. Indeed, the ABC continues to do more with less. Since 2014, the government has cut more than $250 million from the budget and another $84 million in the last budget. In the run-up to the Mayo by-election, a Reachtel poll conducted in my home state of South Australia found that close to 3/4 of Australians wanted the ABC's funding increased or maintained at its current level. That includes more than 70% of coalition voters. Given the results of the Mayo and Wentworth by-elections, where the ABC was an issue in both polls, there are lessons for all of us in those findings. The implications are that the public do not appreciate perceptions that the ABC is under political pressure and that its independence is threatened. For those two reasons alone, the bill I have introduced would be an important step forward in enhancing the ABC's independence and ability to withstand political pressure. Threats to the independence of the ABC are nothing new. By my estimation, since the mid-70s, no fewer than 4 of the 11 ABC board chairs have had their terms cut short for failing to live up to the expectations of the government of the time, both Coalition and Labor. 3 managing directors have met the same fate. Some displeased the government of the day, some were not up to the job. What unites them all is that they were subject to less than transparent processes which have cumulatively led to a loss of public confidence, not in the independence of the ABC, but in its ability to withstand attacks on that independence. On that score, Ms Guthrie told Four Corners, as we saw last Monday, the minister had complained to the ABC 6 times in 5 months. Unprecedented in any term was the phrase used to describe the minister's behaviour. Now, another chair and another managing director are gone mid-term, despite the introduction in 2012 of new measures for board appointments designed to ensure, as stated by the government of the day, a transparent and democratic board appointment process that appoints non-executive directors on merit. Transparent and on merit are the key terms here. However, in recent years, the intent and spirit of this process has been ignored on at least 3 occasions, leading to public disquiet about the independence and integrity of the ABC. 3 appointees to the ABC board by this government were not recommended by the independent nomination panel. A 4th was highly rated by the panel that then withdrew from the process and was subsequently appointed by the minister. The National Broadcasting Legislation Amendment Bill of 2012 established an independent nomination panel designed to nominate appointments of non-executive directors to the boards of the ABC and SBS based on merit, as I said a moment ago. According to the Act, the nominees were required to have had experience in connection with the provision of broadcasting services or in communications or management, expertise in financial or technical matters, or cultural or other interests relevant to the oversight of a public organisation engaged in the provision of broadcasting. But the Act also enabled the Prime Minister of the day to ignore panel nominations as long as he or she tabled the reasons for that appointment in each House of the Parliament no later than 15 sitting days after that appointment is made. The intention was honourable, but it has turned out to be a substantial deficiency. As Senator Nick Minchin, the then Shadow Communications Minister, said in this place on the 17th of November 2009, when the legislation was introduced, while the government is establishing a nomination panel for the appointment process, at the end of the day, the scope remains for the Minister and the Prime Minister to ignore panel nominations and appoint whoever they like. And so it has turned out to be, setting in train a course of events which once again now sees the ABC with a managing director whose term has been cut short and a chair whose actions have forced him to resign. A bare majority of the current ABC board were appointed as a result of recommendations from the independent nomination panel. 2 of the current board were not nominated as qualified candidates by the panel, and 1 did not even apply. The amendment I am proposing is designed to remedy this situation by returning to the spirit and intent of the legislation, which set up the independent nomination panel and the process surrounding it. It is a modest proposal, a multi-stage, graduated process to enhance independence, transparency, multi-partisanship and public confidence, both in the appointment process and the future independence of the ABC. What it is not is an attempt to impose US Senate-style confirmation hearings on Australian democracy. The bill is consistent with the principles of Westminster government. The ultimate appointment of a non-executive director remains the prerogative of the Governor-General on the recommendation of the Prime Minister in the case of the Chair or the Minister in the case of a Director. The bill requires the Prime Minister in the case of the Chair of the ABC or the Minister in the case of the other non-executive directors to publish the name of their proposed appointment if they intend to ignore the recommendations of the Independent Nomination Panel at least 30 days before the appointment proceeds. This strengthens the integrity of the panel process and of its members. It maintains the confidentiality of those candidates not recommended by the panel and enhances the authority of panel nominations by putting them in the public domain. The confidentiality of the nomination process before the panel's announcement minimises the likelihood of well-qualified individuals being deterred from putting their names forward. It reduces the prospects that the efforts of the panel will have been a waste of time, as former panel member and former Coalition Government Minister Neil Brown has pointed out when his and the other panel members' nominations were ignored. The reasons must be published on the website of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. The opposition leader must be informed in writing and invited to comment within a reasonable period. If the opposition leader informs the Prime Minister, in the case of the Chairman, or the Minister, in the case of other non-executive directors, in writing within the specified period that he or she does not agree with the appointment, the Prime Minister must cause a statement of reasons, including an assessment of the appointee against the selection criteria set down for the Independent Review Panel, to be tabled in both Houses of Parliament. In that situation, the Prime Minister must not recommend the Governor-General make the appointment until after the end of the 90-day period beginning when the statement was tabled in the second of the Houses. This strengthens the current legislation, which requires the Prime Minister consult with the opposition leader only in the case of an appointment of the ABC Chair before recommending the appointment to the Governor-General. Following tabling of the government's statements of reasons in both Houses of Parliament, it will be open to the Senate to hold an inquiry into the nomination by the relevant committee. It is hoped that this new final step need never be taken, that the modest, measured, graduated steps I am proposing would be sufficient to encourage governments to accept the nominations of the Independent Review Panel. If they were not, the voters would see where responsibility for any consequences of the government's actions lay, with the government and no one else. And that is where the responsibility rests for the recent episode centring on the former chair and former managing director of the ABC, with the government and no one else. They appointed Justine Mill. He headed the board who sacked Ms Guthrie. He was recommended by the Independent Nomination Panel, but as he told Four Corners, he put his name forward only after being approached by the Minister. We now know that the Minister was informed of the breakdown in relations between the board and Ms Guthrie on September 12th, 12 days before her dismissal became public. The Minister denies that he has ever, in any way, shape or form, sought to involve himself in ABC staffing matters. Clearly, Mr Milne saw it differently. In the report commissioned by the Minister from his department's secretary and in the Four Corners program, Mr Milne does not deny that he wrote an email to Ms Guthrie about an article by ABC Chief Economics Correspondent Emma Alberici. That email stated that they, the government, hate her. "We are tarred with her brush," he said. "I think it's simple," went on Mr Milne. "Get rid of her. We need to save the ABC, not Emma. There is no guarantee they, the coalition, will lose the next election." According to the report of the Secretary of the Department of Communication and the Arts, the former ABC chair acknowledges that a conversation with Ms Guthrie about ABC political editor Andrew Probman was around what to do with him. Mr Milne does not recall, but in the Secretary's report does not deny having used the term "to shoot him" in reference to Mr Probman in that conversation. According to the Secretary's report, Mr Milne does not consider that either communication was a direction to the Managing Director. But it doesn't matter what the Secretary, Mr Milne, thinks. What is significant is what Ms Guthrie thought was the message of Mr Milne's communications with her. According to the Secretary's report, Ms Guthrie does consider the Alberici email constituted a direction to take action. and was consistent with what she regards as an interventionist approach to the individual staffing and editorial matters which the chair adopted. Equally, Ms Guthrie regards the Probyn phone call from Mr Milne as providing significant pressure to terminate Mr Probyn's employment. Shoot him, get rid of her. No one who uses colloquial Australian would have any doubt what they mean, whatever Mr Milne believes. The current processes for appointing non-executive directors to the ABC board may well have been well-intentioned, but they have failed. It is time, in my view, for the Senate to pass the modest, measured, graduated steps I am proposing so that the chances of political interference in the ABC, real or perceived, are reduced, and the public can be ensured that this preeminent cultural institution is not only genuinely independent, but also has the protections to withstand attacks on that independence, as well as to strengthen its autonomy and integrity. With the Senate inquiry underway, it is better, in my view, that this committee either consider amending its terms of reference to incorporate the intent of this bill, or to use this legislation as a roadmap for making sure the appointment process for members of the ABC board becomes more independent and transparent, as well as improving its integrity. The panel, independent nomination panel, deserve to know that their work will be treated with respect. They also need to know that their reputations are linked to the quality of their recommendations. The public have repeatedly made it clear that they expect their ABC to be free of political interference and to have a management and a board that has the back of the staff as a priority. There's much else that needs to be done, greater funding certainty for the ABC, for example, but I believe this bill is a modest and necessary step forward. I do hope the Senate agrees.